Hello, my name is Ricky Pound and I am the House Director of Turner's House in Twickenham. I would like to welcome you today to hear my presentation on the theme of Sir John Soane and his architectural influences on Turner's House. In this presentation, I will be investigating 12 principal architectural features of Turner's House that could be ascribed to the influence of Sir John Soane. Soane and J.M.W. Turner were good friends and had much in common. Turner knew Soane from at least his time in the Royal Academy, where they were both subsequently professors of different disciplines. Soane the Professor of Architecture from 1806 and Turner the Professor of Perspective from 1807. Turner was also a frequent guest at Sir John Soane's house at number 13, Lincoln's Inn Fields at Holborn, and his abode at Pitsanger Manor in Ealing, which Soane owned from 1800 until 1810. Indeed, Turner was one of the only guests allowed to spend the night after receptions there hosted by the Soanes. When Eliza Soane died in November 1815, Turner was the only person Soane requested to be by his side. Soane and Turner also shared a passion for fishing and were often found together on the rivers Thames and Brent or beside the ponds at Pitsanger Manor. It is known that Soane was a keen eel fisherman, whilst Turner liked to fly and float fish. Another love that bound Turner and Soane together was that of architecture. Indeed, Turner declared that, if he could have had his life again, he would have been an architect. His building at Twickenham was his attempt to fulfil this dream and design a rural retreat for himself and his father, whom he affectionately called Old Dad. Turner had a lifelong interest in architecture, and it was a subject that would feature in many of his paintings, including structures such as churches, bridges, castles, stone circles, ancient temples, coastal fortifications, lighthouses, windmills, industrial architecture and other buildings. The subject of light was another consideration that bound Turner and Soane together, as both professors experimented with the effects of light and the emotions it created in the viewer within architecture and painting. In this presentation, I will therefore be exploring the top 12 architectural elements that inform Turner's house that may have been influenced by Soane. They are the triglyph decoration and pediment, the semi-curved corners of the wing buildings, the Diocletian or thermal type windows, the recessed panels in the brickwork, the original brickwork with its penny line pointing, the new wing buildings including its covered entrance, the faux marble decorations, the succession of internal arches, the fireplace in the dining room, the staircase and balustrade, the shallow arch at the top of the stairs, and the lay light. The building of Sandycombe Lodge took place over two distinct periods. Turner bought the land on which the house would eventually stand in 1807, but it was not until around 1810 that Turner erected the freestanding tower. The tower was made of brick and was not covered by render, as was thought pre-conservation. Towards the top of the tower, a band of decoration, known as triglyphs, runs horizontally beneath the sloping roof, creating a symbolic pediment. Such pediments were a characteristic feature of ancient Greek and Roman temple architecture. In the Renaissance, the pediment was revived and incorporated into domestic buildings, such as those of the architect Andrea Palladio on several of his Venetian villas and churches. Three buildings that Turner was familiar with, two of which had very prominent pediments with triglyph bands running beneath, were the Greek Doric temples at Paestum in Italy. Turner visited the site on his Italian trip of 1819 and illustrated them in his Naples, Paestum and Rome sketchbook, together with a mezzotint for his Little Liber series. Turner had earlier used an existing source to illustrate Lecture Design 52 of the Temple of Neptune at Paestum, possibly after an engraving by Piranesi. Giovanni Battista Piranesi was an influential artist and engraver who had extensively illustrated the temple complex. His corpus of drawings were purchased by John Soane around 1810. Soane had visited and surveyed the Greek temples in 1778 and subsequently had cork models built to accompany his Royal Academy lectures and to enable his students to take an alternative grand tour. Soane also employed the triglyph band on some of his more rustic projects, including this illustration for a dairy building at Hamills Park. You will notice that the side of the building is curved in a similar manner to that of the extensions at Sandycombe Lodge, which were added to the independent tower around 1813. In addition, Soane also used the triglyph configurations at his house at Lincoln's Inn Fields and in his longest running project, that of the Bank of England. That J.M.W. Turner was familiar with the architecture of the Bank of England is not in question, as it was here that Turner deposited his money. Returning to the main tower building, a semicircular lunette window known as a Diocletian or thermal window is positioned towards the base of the building. The Diocletian window is a feature of Roman architecture and was employed by Renaissance architects and popularised by Andrea Palladio and his assistant Vincenzo Scamozzi, and later used by British Palladians including William Kent, Henry Flitcroft and the later worker James Gibbs. Locally, Diocletian windows were used by Lord Burlington in Chiswick House in the Rotunda to bring natural light to the interior. From 1788, William Cavendish, the 5th Duke of Devonshire, added 2 wing buildings at Chiswick, both of which provided Diocletian windows at ground floor level to light the basement rooms. Turner had viewed and drawn the thermal type windows which were positioned towards the end of Richmond Bridge, built between 1774 and 1777 by architects James Payn and Kenton Coues. Payn was a Neo-Palladian architect, his work highly influenced by the architecture of Richard Boyle and William Kent. In addition, Turner included a thermal window in his lecture diagram number 26 of the interior of the Great Room at Somerset House in London. John Soane also employed Diocletian-type windows, often in designs for stable blocks, and extensively at the Bank of England, where they appear in the rotunda above recessed arches. In addition, Soane used a series of thermal windows to light the basement of the waiting room court loggia at the Bank of England, and this is where Turner may have got the idea to use the semicircular window at Sandycombe Lodge to illuminate the below-stairs kitchen. On the exterior of Sandycombe Lodge, Turner incorporated recessed panels into the brickwork to give more variety and depth to the architecture, to create shadows and to provide contrast within the brickwork. The use of recessed panelling as a decorative rather than a functional feature can be seen in a number of buildings by Soane, most notably at Pitzhanger Manor and Dulwich Picture Gallery, with its stripped-back neoclassicism bringing a melancholic feel to its architecture. The recent conservation of Turner's house included the removal of the rendering from the exterior of the tower section of the building. This exposed the original brickwork, leading to the revelation that the wet cement had undergone a process known as penny line pointing. Penny line pointing was a technique where the lined indentation was made with an old penny to regularize the look of the pointing and give the illusion that the bricks had sharp edges. The presence of penny line pointing meant that the house was never intended by Turner to be rendered, as there would be little point in carrying out this time-consuming action only to cover it up with render. The conclusion, therefore, is that the rendering was applied at a later date. John Soane employed penny line pointing and exposed brickwork for many of his architectural creations, including the Dulwich Gallery, his house at Holborn and Pitzhanger Manor. The use of rough brick aesthetically created a rustic feel to the properties, which fitted in with the architectural ideas prevalent at this period, and in particular theories concerning the primitive hut and primitivism. Indeed, in Soane's first lecture at the Royal Academy on architectural origins, the accompanying illustrations were held up to the audience by J.M.W. Turner. By 1813, Turner had decided to extend the Tower House at Twickenham into a proper family home, and archaeological evidence has shown that the tower was unlikely to have contained staircases or floors before this time. In order to achieve this, Turner produced a number of sketches showing different designs for a new pair of side buildings which would attach to the tower. Given the strong Sonian influences in these two side buildings, Soane's involvement is most likely. It is possible that Soane suggested to Turner that the original 3 windows and off-centre door to the tower house be bricked up and a new centralised portico and covered entrance added. The original openings had been dressed at the top with flat or straight arches in imitation of Vasseurs, similar to those used by Soane at Lincoln's Inn Fields and by George Dance the Younger at Pitshanger. The 2 Sandycombe wing buildings were largely symmetrical, providing balance to the structure. As the architectural historian Bruce Boucher has recently pointed out, the profile of the front facade of Sandycombe Lodge, with its pair of half-pedimented roofs, combined with its broken triglyph band above, is strikingly reminiscent of a design by William Kent, and in particular of his Doric garden temple for the Earl of Leicester at his estate at Holkham, which can be dated from 1731. The source for Kent's design is undoubtedly a pared-down version of Andrea Palladio's churches, such as that of San Giorgio Maggiore. This would be a suitable choice for a striking temple-like solution employed by Turner, designed to make the villa all the more imposing in form. Soane, like Kent and Lord Burlington before him, was influenced by the great Renaissance master architect Palladio. The stripped-down primitive style of the building was complemented by the minimal use of 2 rows of egg and dark castings positioned above the doorway, derived from Turner's sketches of Sir Christopher Wren's monument in the City of London. Turner recorded these details in his Windmill and Lock sketchbook. During the restoration project, Butler Hegarty Architects revealed the presence of faux marble on the walls in the hall. This was lovingly recreated to produce the marbling effect that Turner would have been familiar with. Painted marble effect on walls was popular in the late Georgian period. John Soane had similar faux marble applied to his walls at nearby Pitshanger Manor, which has recently been revealed during restoration and reinstated in the vestibule in different colours, including that of porphyry, with its own Egyptian and ultimately Roman imperial connotations. At his home in Holborn, Soane also used paint to resemble yellow sienna marble. One of the most prominent and visually striking features inside Turner's house is the succession of arches leading from the hall to the sitting room, small parlour and dining room. Such arches are an important element of Soane's architectural vocabulary and are present at Soane's house at 13 Lincoln's Inn Fields, Dulwich Picture Gallery, the Bank of England and Pitshanger Manor, amongst others. Soane's employment of arches, often running in succession, were arguably derived from Giovanni Battista Pavanese's pronounced employment of arches in his drawings, themselves highly influenced by the monumental triumphal arches of ancient Rome, together with bridge arches and arches supporting domes. That Turner was familiar with the work of Piranesi is not in doubt, as Turner's friend Soane was a great collector of his art and housed 15 of the original Paestum drawings at his house at Lincoln's Inn Fields. Soane had previously met Piranesi in 1778, when he was on his grand tour shortly before the Italian's death, where he was presented with 4 engravings, including the Arch of Constantine and the Arch of Septimus Severus. Turner also copied several of Piranesi's prison scenes, with an emphasis on exploring the effects of light and shadow. In addition, Piranesi's dark taste for the sublime would have appealed to Turner's aesthetic sensibilities, in particular Turner's representations of the epic scale and terrifying aspects of nature, compared with the transitory and often fragile and precarious existence of man. As Gary Butler from Butler Hegarty elaborates, it is the imminent threat lurking in the natural world that is the source of Turner's vision at Sandycombe, perhaps even the raison d'etre for returning to the country or leaving the city to go fishing. Sandycombe Lodge is a rustic building rather than an essay about the ideal temple, and can perhaps be better described as a hermitage. In the dining room that leads from the hall is an impressive marble fireplace. It is unknown whether the fireplace was a later introduction or whether it was at Sandycombe Lodge during Turner's residency. The form of the fireplace is very Sonian in character, and although no designs in Soane's hands for such a fireplace has yet been found, it does remain a possibility that it was contemporary with Turner and in situ since his time. In addition, the colour of the marble is a good match for the use of dark marbling on the skirting boards in the hall. The original mushroom pink colour of the walls in this room were revealed through forensic examination by Helen Hughes and returned to its original colour during restoration. Although a popular 19th century colour, it is known that Soane also employed the same palette at his residences. Another notable feature at Turner's house is the staircase and its iron balustrade, which ascends anti-clockwise to the two bedrooms on the first floor. Halfway up on the right is a niche, which in Turner's time could have contained a plaster cast figure of the sun god Apollo, a Wedgwood urn, or it may have remained unoccupied. The relationship between the staircase, the location of the niche, and its balustrade, reached by walking under a succession of arches from the hall, has a very strong relationship to a similar staircase at Soane's house at number 13, Lincoln's Inn Fields. Such similarities are reinforced by the faux marble decoration on the staircase walls and the lay light positioned immediately above. Spanning the top of the stairs is a shallow wooden elliptical arch, which is also a Soanean feature. The arch is very similar to the one that appears in J.M.W. Turner's painting Forum Romanum, which is framed by a shallow arch and shows the Arch of Titus. Turner painted this view of the Forum specifically for Soane as a reminder of his extensive grand tour and love of classical architecture. Soane used similar shallow arches at Wimpole Hall and Freemasons Hall in London. The lay light, which illuminates the staircase with its floral motif, has been identified by glass historian Michael Peover as being contemporary with the building of Sandycombe Lodge. It is similar to glass used by Sir John Soane at his house at Lincoln's Inn Fields and would indicate that Turner used Soane's glass supplier. The floral motif in the lay light at Sandycombe Lodge is a moving work of art, which at certain times of the year is projected onto the base of the walls below, depending on the position of the sun. In its earliest period, the house was known as Solace Lodge, following the idea of solitude and seclusion, but also the notion of the temple of the sun. John Soane is often referred to as the master of space and light, and used tinted glass of different colours and combinations, combined with reflective surfaces, to refract and reflect light to create a range of emotions within the viewer, dependent on the time of day and year. This had great similarities to the paintings of Turner, and in particular to those of the later years, where his excessive use of yellow, lack of detail, and the abstract nature of his works were meant to inspire emotions within the viewer that went beyond form and substance. As Gary Butler explains once more, in full control of the interior, the architect can manipulate light, form, material, and sequential movement to invoke the poetic imagination, and it is here that architecture is most similar to painting. Soane's built work is often described as an architectural analogy to Turner's poetic blend of light and matter. Although no designs exist for Turner's house in Soane's hand, his influence at the house is undeniable and particularly strong. Although J.M.W. Turner designed the house, he almost certainly turned to his friend for assistance and advice. That no design in Soane's hand has yet surfaced is not surprising, as both men saw each other regularly, and such designs could have been discussed privately at a number of locations, including at Soane's properties, the Royal Academy, or on fishing trips. Sandycombe Lodge is Turner's largest work of art and serves as a monument to Turner's desire to test himself as an architect and to Sir John Soane's standing as London's leading architect, but ultimately as a testament to the friendship of two of the most brilliant minds of their day. I hope you have enjoyed this short presentation. For more information on opening times, events, previous talks, how to donate, or how to get involved, please visit Turner's House at www.turnershouse.org. Thank you for listening.